Courses on the Bible can be taught in public school. They are not against the law.
If the same sort of attention is paid to the sacred writings of other faiths.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you, Mark, and I too am so glad you've joined us for today's program, Biblical Literacy and Public Schools. That is the subject for today. But before we get started, I'd like for you to meet our panelists. We're going to ask them to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they do. Let's begin with the gentleman to my right.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics at Fuller Theological Seminary, where I'm also Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations. I live in Pasadena, California, and I'm a minister with the Assemblies of God.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I serve as Senior Pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
I'm Andrea Luxon. I'm President of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I'm an Episcopal priest, canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval. I'm the Richard J. Dinda Professor of Lutheran Identity and Mission at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the Senior Minister at First Christian Church, Fort Worth, Texas. We're a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today. So glad you could join us. Looking forward to today's discussion. Let's get right to it. The editorial board of the Washington Post recently posted an opinion piece entitled "Bible Literacy Classes in Public Schools Violate Separation of Church and State." It began by acknowledging that the Bible is one of the most consequential books of all time. It went on to cite the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court in 1963 that outlawed Bible reading as part of public prayers. While the court upheld the academic study of the Bible or religion presented objectively as part of a secular program of education as valid, the editors bemoaned that fundamentalists with apparent presidential support are engaged in an organized legislative effort to enact laws that would encourage high schools to teach the Bible as an elective curricular choice. I'd like our panelists to answer at least these following questions. First of all, do you view the request to allow Bible electives in high school as violating the separation of doctrine of the U.S. Constitution? A second question, do you view an organized legislative effort by any party with respect to the place of the Bible in schools as a violation of the separation doctrine? And then finally, how should members of Jewish and Christian faith communities respond to those who seem to have an organized anti-biblical literacy agenda? Well, that is the subject and the questions for today. We're going to go back now to those who helped to begin the program by making opening remarks. And for that, we go back to Dr. Robeck. Welcome to the program today. And tell us a little bit more. You say it's not a violation of separation of church and state.
No, it's not a violation of separation of church and state. You know, one of the interesting things about our history as Americans is that for almost 3 full centuries, the Bible was used as a textbook within most schools. If it may have been taught as literature, it may have been taught for grammar and English, but it was taught. And the whole point of that was to help people, I think, develop, in a sense, a common culture. Much of our legal system is based upon the kinds of things we find in Scripture. Old Testament in particular, Judeo-Christian moral codes and so forth. And it's also the case that much of the literature in the history of the Western world makes allusions to what is found in Scripture. So when I get into a class and I'm teaching a church history class, I may go back to the Old Testament, because that's history as well, and I may talk about Moses and Aaron. But when I get a seminary student, a graduate student, who doesn't know who Aaron is, then I have questions about, well, what was left out of this person's curriculum? Now, it's also the case, I would say, that when you read the Bible is very clear that the parents are responsible for biblical literacy in the home. They're supposed to be passing on to their children the basic materials from the Scripture. It's also the case that the church is supposed to be doing that, or the synagogue, in a sense, is supposed to be doing that. So I would say that even within Muslim culture, where a good deal of Old Testament material is present, it plays a very significant role. So it's not, in a sense, lifting up one religion over against another. There are several religions involved. It does lift up three religions over against other religions, and therefore I think we have to be careful. So what we're looking for is a balance. When it comes to core curriculum, I think what we're looking for is equality across the core so that everybody understands that we have a common core. But when it comes to electives, I'm far more open to the possibility that good can be done by offering this as an elective course for certain people.
All right, thank you very much. Reverend Plumley, welcome back to the program today. You're also concerned about the teaching it objectively. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I really don't quibble with anything that Mel has said, because that's a good argument, and I think one is undereducated if one does not know some of the broad history, some of the major values that come from Scripture. The problem comes, however, with the way it's taught in many cases. The people doing the teaching are not prepared to do it because they're only dealing with the Bible has been as a Sunday school teacher. Now, you take a person like that and bring them into a literature class to be teaching about how Scripture is that particular reference in Shakespeare is a biblical allusion to the story of such and such, which is great. But that person who has him or herself no more understanding of Scripture than the sort of things that you do in Sunday school is not going to be able to do that well. Although the Bible is clearly, and Judeo-Christian values are clearly the most prominent in the history of this nation. The Talmud does have effect as well. The Book of Mormon does have effect as well. The Bhagavad Gita does have effect, and the sacred texts of other faiths could be taught in the same way that the Bible is. My bigger concern is what's noted here as an organized legislative effort. Okay, folks, we simply need to know this kind of legislation is a part of what's called Project Blitz, and that's not a name that comes to it from its opponents. That's a name that the adherents of this approach to legislation have given their 148-page playbook for how to get evangelism back into public schools. And it goes like this. Number one, you understand that like a blitz, you are going to overload legislatures, state legislatures, with all sorts of legislation that is aimed at eroding the separation of church and state. You start with relatively non-controversial things like this one, or like a bill that says, well, let's have folks able to put "In God We Trust" on our license plates. Then you step it up to other bills like a resolution favoring that that intercourse should only be between a man and a woman. Then you step it up to other legislation that says LGBTQ folks are not eligible for adoption. And just gradually, this is an outline of a slippery slope.
All right, thank you. Let's hear from the other panelists now. Let's go down the table. Dr. Troval, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
Your thoughts on the subject, please.
I'd be completely opposed to the use of the Bible as a sectarian advocacy tool, which I feel that the motivation for this does come out of that. That said, though, I think that we need far more biblical literacy among the whole American populace as a whole, and not only biblical in the sense of our own traditions, but I agree with both of you that we need to widen it and talk about the understanding of other sacred traditions and that other people consider sacred. I do believe that we have a problem of empathy and understanding other cultures. As multicultural as we are, we seem to have a complete blind spot about understanding. And I think that this would open that up to understanding where people are coming from, why they have the values they do, why certain things are important. So I not only would advocate that we have biblical literacy, but that we have a broad literacy of what religion is, how people practice it, why it's important in people's lives, and why it doesn't automatically lead to terrorism and fundamentalism and anti-other people, that it's actually a source of healing and power and growth and possibility.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Matthews, welcome back to the program today. Your thoughts so
It's
far,
a very
please.
interesting topic, and I certainly love the idea of the Bible being taught as an elective in schools. I love this idea. And to answer the question, as Mel and Tom mentioned, it is perfectly constitutional. I think a lot of folks think that it's not constitutional. You cited in the moderator's statement the 1963 court case, and also there's the 1980 Stone Graham case where the Supreme Court basically ruled that the Bible can be taught so long as it is taught from history, ethics, comparative religions, and so on and so forth. I was surprised to read how the ACLU came out with a publication titled The Bible in Public Schools, and they actually also admitted that the Bible can be taught so long as it is taught from an academic standpoint and not a devotional standpoint. And I think that's the line that we have to kind of be careful on. Taught where you're not forcing people to accept it, but just to be aware of the principles in the scripture. But I love the ideal. I think it's good, and I think I would love to see it happen across the United States.
All right, thank you very much. Next to you is Canon Peterson. John Peterson, welcome back today. Your thoughts, please.
Thank you so much. I would just like to add a little bit to what Mel said in one point, that in relationship to the Quran, of course, you have the high Jewish Hebrew scripture influence, but you also in the Quran have a very strong Christian perspective, and Jesus is a key figure, and certainly the Virgin Mary, who's mentioned more times in the Quran than she's mentioned actually in this Bible. I think that one of the things that we should remember is that the title of this program is Biblical Literacy in Public Schools Once Again. Mm-hmm. And this once again came as a result of a tweet that the president made last January, in which he was urging biblical literacy classes, starting to make a great turnaround in that, and of course having his support. However, the Christian Post, which is a denominational, evangelical Christian publication, has pointed out that this time, this issue is a political issue. And it is not a theological issue, but the whole issue, that the blitz that you were speaking about, is a political issue. I have absolutely no problem whatsoever about looking at the scripture from a historical point of view, et cetera, et cetera. But the issue becomes when it isn't being used that way, and it's being used as a political tool instead. And I think that's really where the problem is. I just want to ask one more question. Why just the Bible? And I agree perfectly with Tom. Why not all the other great religious traditions that are in our schools today? No longer are we just simply a Christian, but much more multi.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Luxton.
Yeah, I want to come into it from a slightly different angle. I really agree with just about everything everyone has said. And I do think the importance of all the sacred books, I think that's really important, particularly when you look at it from the perspective of values and traditions and where people come from. But I want to talk specifically about biblical literacy from my background. I'm a literature teacher, that's my background. And it's become clear over time that, well, my period, I should say, is 16th, 17th century literature. You cannot comprehend that without having a deep knowledge of biblical literacy. And what has happened over a period of time is that there's an increasing incapacity of students to access literature that is really part of our, at least Western traditional thinking. The same would go for art, even to some degree music. In all of those areas of the humanities, they have such deep roots in understanding of the Bible, not as doctrine. I mean, some of it is doctrinal, but even more deeply than that. So all the allusions. Milton's my particular speciality. Many universities don't even study Milton now. So here's one of the greatest poets of all time, and he can't be studied because the students don't get it. They don't get the understanding, and so what do you do with that? So it seems to me that even on that very basic level, biblical literacy is actually a part of our history, our culture, that if we ignore it, we actually limit the education of our students. So as you can understand, I'm all for biblical literacy, not evangelism. Absolutely there for biblical literacy.
Thank you for that. That's a very insightful observation. Appreciate that very much. I think, Tom, you had your hand up there. Please.
Yes. I think the reason that folks shy away from teaching Milton is because others have, at times, brought the Bible into the classroom and used it strictly for evangelism purposes, or putting pressure on kids to make a decision about confessing their faith. I think there's a good test that we should ask all parents to apply to anything that their kids bring home, and they say, "Oh yeah, we're talking about the Bible today," or we have this test on Christian themes in American literature that I've got to study for. I think that the test for the parents is to ask, would you appreciate the sacred text of Islam or Hinduism or Buddhism to be taught in exactly the same way that this teacher is teaching this class on the Bible?
All right.
I think that's your test.
Dr. Trovald, you were having your hand up.
Well, I think it's kind of fascinating because, as I recall, Milton's poking a little bit at kind of the traditional biblical. So, I mean, if you want a great critique, let's do the Bible and Milton, and then we have both point and counterpoint, because the great part of the tradition is that it's always an argument with itself because it's about interpretation. This idea that the Bible can be taught objectively is complete hogwash, because it can't be. It's always taught from the perspective of the individual. So that means that interpretation, hermeneutics has to be brought into play. This is why countertext. It is.
It's never objective.
No.
You can't have it as totally objective.
And that's why
that's not evangelistic, though.
Right, and that's why it should be taught in our schools so that people learn how to think.
Or taught dispassionately. Maybe that's a different word that could be
that
injected
might be
into
better,
this
yeah.
because of our predilections and whatever else. Dr. Williams or Dr. Matthews, you had something else to say add to this?
Yeah, I think the question can be raised. We perhaps should kind of probe into why there is this blitz that Tom talked about. Could it be that there's an
easy answer to that one.
Okay.
It's a political decision.
Okay, and in addition to that, it could certainly be political. I don't doubt that. But also, is there a movement, a push to teach a lot of different things in our public schools that are contrary to the Bible? I was just stunned to turn on the television and see that there was a drag queen hour taught to first and second graders, and a lot of parents protested. And of course, we have dignity and respect for everyone. And I think there are things that are being taught in the public schools that is pushing others to move this into a political and legislative
And that's
area.
going to have to be the last statement for this segment. We're out of time. That went very quickly. But there's more of the program left. But stand by. There's an important announcement I'd like for you to hear. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you and welcome back. I'm very glad you've tuned in for today's program, and I do encourage you to drop us a line. We do get some great ideas as to subjects and things that we can talk about here on the program for people like you who send in notes and cards or go to the website. You can send us an email and also take a look at those archived programs. They're very interesting. If you're new to the program especially, that'll be a nice way of being introduced to the program. Let's go now for our summary statements. We'll begin with Dr. Mel Robeck. You're first.
Right. Without some knowledge of the Bible, I think that we have a great loss within the American, and I would say Western culture as a whole. But I also would welcome courses on Quran and other sacred books for different reasons. If they're all elective courses, I don't see the problem to it because people choose to take those electives. Tom, you raised a question about the blitz that's going on as a political blitz in a sense, but political blitzes go on all the time. And they're not simply about the Bible. They're about, say the LGBTQ plus agenda. That's been blitzed for 35 years or 40 years, see? So I think that we have multiple blitzes going on, but every time the Christian one comes up or the evangelical one comes up, it's a bad one. It's a bad one.
All right, thank you. Now, Dr. Luxon, your summary statement, please.
Yeah, you go into any classroom, any discipline, history, science, math, English, whatever, you can't just do what you want. There is always a frame within a classroom and an expectation. So I don't think we should not do something because of fear that it might be abused in the classroom by the teacher. Things can be framed. You can choose who is teaching a class. So I don't think for fear of getting someone who is going to be evangelistic, we should stop doing something that is actually, in my mind at least, a good and very important to education.
All right, thank you. Dr. Trovall, your summary, please. In
our Doctor of Ed class, we have a course that I teach called Leadership in the Faith Traditions, and we look at the primary texts of the different world religions. And one of the surprising things to me is to find how many of the doctoral students make a comment like, this is really meaningful stuff. Like, I think I'm going to come back and reread something like the Tao Te Ching and the Bhagavad Gita for my own personal devotional life, not because they've somehow not left their Christian faith, but how they realize the depth of the value systems that are in all of these sacred texts. And I would want all of our public schools to be encouraging the reading and study of these texts in that way to draw from the depths of the spiritual and moral wisdom from those texts.
All right, thank you. Reverend Plumley, your summation.
Yes. I want to just repeat the test that I gave out for parents. Would you appreciate the sacred text of Islam, for instance, to be taught in the same way that the Bible is being taught in your child's classroom? And by the way, for more information on Project Blitz, go to the website of the Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. you can see the entire 148-page document laid out. There are not parallel playbooks on the other side.
All right, thank you. And Canon Peterson, your summation.
Yes, I think it's very important, particularly what we're talking about right now in relationship to having other texts, being able to understand other traditions. But the problem there as well is of teachers being educated to be able to teach them. I mean, there'd be nothing worse than having a teacher not knowing a thing about Hinduism and teaching a course in Hinduism. So I think, it's a catcher's catch can as well in this situation. I'm going to end up what I want to say with one quote. If Christians don't trust public schools to teach their children about sex or science, why would they want to outsource instruction about sacred scripture to government employees?
All right, thank you. Now, Dr. Matthews, your summation,
I'll
please.
pick up where John left off. I think I think it's great if the school system would allow the Bible to be used to teach on those very topics. And also with some of the more controversial areas, the Bible does an excellent job teaching how we should accept each other and how we should love each other and treat people with dignity and respect. And I would like to see the Bible brought back in a broader way to do that. So I think that's a good thing.
All right, thank you. And thank you to everyone on today's panel. Appreciate, your being here today. And also, I hope this has stimulated some thought for perhaps discussions around the kitchen table, or maybe at your PTA or with your teachers, wherever your children go to school. I think it's a very healthy discussion, and I do appreciate the way each of our panelists has come from a little bit different perspectives here, but that's what this program is really about. It's not all about having just one opinion, but in sharing opinions, we can come to some better understanding. And I think we had some really great insight here from some of you today. Maybe this clarified what is legal, what is not legal. And that's what I think is the genius of this program, to be able to have this kind of conversation and discussion around this table. And again, if this is the first time you've tuned in, we're very glad that you've joined us today. Looking forward to your coming back next time when we gather around this table. For now, the charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.